Okay, so I won't be as concise, I'm sure, as Patty is, because she does such a wonderful job, but we're calling the meeting to order this morning on the 18th at 9:00. I got 9:09. We have Brian, Holly, and myself as the members today. Hopefully, Patty will be able to join us later, and Laura, I think, is joining when she's done with her other engagements. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'll help direct me if necessary, but I think the first line of business here is the January 3rd minutes and approval of those draft minutes.
Do we want to review the agenda first?
Yeah. Oh yeah, review the agenda first. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so let's look at the agenda. Are there any changes or additions we want to make to it?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second. Okay, so moved. Since it's all three of us.
And I can't move the
agenda
minutes.
Is adopted.
I cannot move the minutes because I was not present. I'll note that Chris Recchia's name is misspelled in the public comment section. The proper spelling is Recchia, I believe.
Thank you.
I will move the minutes be accepted.
Okay, with the spelling adjustment.
With Mr. Recchia's name corrected.
Okay, I second that. Can we vote?
Aye.
Aye.
I have one question now that they've passed. I have one question for those of you who are there. The minutes say that Patty recommended motioned or moved a September 15th date for the community, whatever that's called, the community grant program.
Yep.
It doesn't say that that motion ever passed. So are you?
I believe it did. My recollection is it did pass. But
it did.
Could you amend your motion, Brian, to say that the statement in the minutes should say that that motion passed?
I would move to go ahead. Dan, did you have something?
It says the motion was approved.
It does. Maybe I just missed that.
It's the last sentence.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, then I'll stand with my original.
All right.
She made the motion to approve the RFP. Was the RFP amended to include the September 15th date? Sorry to be nitpicky.
Okay. Well, that was the intention. So,
Rob, was that true? Is that a true thing that Holly just said?
I'll have to look at the minutes, but yes, it was there was a motion that was approved to change the date to September 15th, and that is in the RFP that will be released later today.
Very good.
So I guess just for our minutes drafters, it's good to always have a reconciliation on any motions made.
Okay. So we have, Brian, do we need to adjust that, or is it recorded that?
Yeah, it does not. I don't, what I heard, I don't think I have to change anything, but someone tell me if I've got that wrong, please.
Let's leave it. I mean, I think it's technically vague, but the RFP is going to come out with the date in it. Mm-hmm. It's fine.
Good.
Okay. Good point. And the date was the one that we agreed to. So item number 3. Stan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. First thing I'm going to do is run through some of the recent state legislative and regulatory activities that have been going on. The first issue is regarding a possible proposal to amend Act 71, a minor change to it.
Hey Stan, are you attempting to share your screen right now?
Oh,
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, let me try that.
And do the window, not the live PowerPoint. It's kind of funky.
Okay. I'm not, okay. All right.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great. So the first issue I want to discuss is a possible amendment to Act 71. We understand from discussions with some of the CUDs and state officials that there might be an issue regarding the CUDs being able to access the bond market. And there are two separate provisions in Act 71 that discuss assets going back to the state. And so I just wanted to raise both of those, and then we can discuss whether one or both of them should be changed and talk about what those changes could be. The first is on page 17 of the original act, paragraph C3, 8086 C3, which talks about, it regards the construction grant program and states that the board shall establish standards for recouping grant funds and transferring ownership of grant-funded network assets to the state if a grantee materially fails to comply with the terms and conditions in the grant. The second is regards transfer of fiber optic assets. That's on page 25 of the original act. And it requires, in the event of a CUD dissolution, that its assets shall become property of the state to be managed by the Public Service Department. From recent discussions I've had with some folks, I think the second one regards some specific fiber optic lines that were put in through a different program. And so I'm not sure that that is necessarily needs to be fixed, but the fix that we thought could address the issue of things going back to the state would be to change language to say, subject to receivership by a court-appointed receiver. And on the next slide, that shows how the language would be fixed.
Yeah, so let's take a pause on this one. This is important. We'll get a resolution from the board on how to if whether or not you accept that or not. We did not, Holly, we, subject to your advice was, we took your advice and did not include that in the report. But we did say we would come back to the legislature by the end of January with some recommendations. So I would request that the board take a vote on this and discuss it, as well as, I know Krista has some concerns about this, so you may want to hear from Krista Shute as well if she's willing to contribute. But anyway,
I would like to start at the beginning, but if Dan and Brian, if you have comments, I defer to you.
No, I just want to talk through the implications of this. Like, I'd like to walk through a scenario. What
Okay.
happens? CUDA defaults, whatever. What happens? That's all.
So first of all, I disagree with you, Stan, that because the segment of fiber assets that's transferred arose under a different program, that it should be somehow treated differently. One of the big challenges is if you're going to produce a network that's going to be publicly funded, or I'm sorry, funded through the public bond market,
Mm-hmm.
It would be best if that network wasn't treated as disparate parts, but rather as an integrated whole. I mean, just for simplicity's sake, it isn't going to help things if, you know, the segment between town A and town B has different title and dissolution requirements than the segment from town B to town D. So I just think we should try to treat it all as a piece. That would be best. Not fatal, but best. And can someone explain where this idea of receivership came up? And has this language been reviewed by bond counsel?
Well, yeah, we discussed, you know, as staff, we discussed this. The issue, and let me go to Brian's request, and let's let's just talk about, you know, an example of what could happen. The concern here is that, and yes, by the way, we, you know, the head of the bond bank, Gagne, I forget his first name, talked about this. We didn't actually have him clear this language, however, but we talked about the importance of making sure that the debtors get paid during, you know, so if we, so taken literally, we turn these assets of, in the unlikely event of a CUD failure, it would, let's just say we're going to have the controls in place where we'll hopefully have some good foresight to this and be able to work with those CUDs early on to prevent this to happen. But should it does happen that they get into some type of financial failure, well, the issue for the the issue for the bonders as well as if they're taking out loans is they're not going to get loans if they're not going to get paid, right? So we've got to make sure they get paid. We got to make sure we continue to make payments on the debt, continue to service the debt. But turning it over to the state as being the first in line means that you won't get financing. Now what happens if, now let's assume that the state didn't pick.
Can I clarify? Can I ask for clarification? You mean first in line, not to get paid, but rather first in line to manage the debt? What do you mean?
Yeah, first in line to get paid.
Oh,
if they're first in line to get paid, if they're first in line,
because this doesn't say that either, you know.
Yeah, the receivership guarantees that they'll get paid. That's why this is important. The receiver, if you look at, I mean, Jay Peak's a great example, right?
Okay, so going to Brian's, yeah, a great
Not
example
really.
in a bad way.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Ouch.
I meant for how it happens when it fails, not a great example in general.
Right.
Less is more, Christine. Less is more.
Yeah, I think you should try those international investors for a comment on that. So the concept here is that the grantee, it fails to make payment on its debt, the grantee being the CUD, and after whatever demand is made by the lender, then the court, just as in a bankruptcy, the assets go to a court receiver. Why wouldn't we just call it a bankruptcy?
I
don't know if there's other circumstances under which a CUD would become, you know, a non-operating entity other than bankruptcy, but.
Yeah.
Well, I could see where it could dissolve for purposes of commercial viability if it grows beyond and it goes commercially beyond what a CUD was intended. Or what happens if a CUD dissolves because it merges into another one and the neighboring CUD takes it on?
Well, that would be, it could be a good thing, right?
Yeah, it could be. There could be ways where growth brings it to its own dissolution.
Oh, that's a great point.
So to your point, the dissolution of a communications union district isn't necessarily the trigger. that should be sending something into receivership, because if you merge two CUDs,
Yeah,
you're gonna,
it should be something where they're not able to own the assets anymore. I mean, that's
or
they
make,
call
or,
them
or
maintain.
meet their debt. Meet their debt.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds a lot like bankruptcy to me.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
What if we just change that to recommend the change that upon bankruptcy and clarify with the legislature that there's other forms of dissolution?
Oh, gosh. Somebody, the brilliant FX Flynn, just texted me to remind me that we're talking about municipalities here. Now, I think a municipality technically can go bankrupt, but it's a it's a whole different process. So what we really need to do, and maybe Stan could help us do this, is call out the language that is it sets the criteria for a bankruptcy, as in not meeting your debt, unable to meet debt, or meet the, or you're forced into bankruptcy by the claims of your debtors. But the fact of the matter is, this is a municipality, so what are you going to do?
Right.
And so I get the value of having a receiver, and I get the importance that since municipalities can't go into receivership normally, then you need something. But we really need somebody who's been in the bond market. I think we need some better advice on this.
Has this not been reviewed by somebody who's familiar with the bond market and would indicate that this language would be acceptable to bond issuers?
From my point of view, Brian, there's one person in the state that really can opine here, and that's Paul Giuliani. Now, I know you checked in with the head of our Vermont Bond Bank, but I don't think you got specific support.
I didn't. No, I did not.
Yeah, and so I would suggest, Christine, that Stan and you make an appointment with Paul Giuliani to find out what methods would be acceptable to the bondholders.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, EC Fiber has cracked this nut already. So, can't we just, if they're willing to, can't we just piggyback on their knowledge, because they know how this works? They're doing it every day.
Well, they don't have this language to contend with, though.
No, that's what I mean. But I'm sure, based on their experience in the bond market and their relationships in the bond market.
Well, and Paul Giuliani is their attorney for bond.
Perfect. Got it.
So I just want a couple clarifying things of Holly, what you said earlier is when VCBB funds a network, that network is also funded from private investment, the bond market, who knows what else. So having to participate in dissolving a bankruptcy once before and trying to retain the assets that are critical for the operation, specifically Adelphia Cable, it's almost exactly what we're trying to manage here. It's complicated, and those parts, some of this funding might go into elements of the network, and some of the funding may never be considered for it. And I think something like receivership would be appropriate. But forming this, or in support of what you guys were talking about, forming this for legislative action should be informed by Giuliani, or certainly not me. And I like the conversation. It just doesn't seem baked yet.
Yeah. This is not my field of expertise. I'm not going to make any opinion about it. And I don't feel like we're there yet, to your point, Dan.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear about the components that make this up are very complicated, and they're very diverse in the type of assets they are. So the importance of getting someone who's experienced, Holly, as you proposed, I think is very important. Steve Huffaker has his hand up. Are we done with conversation here? Would we like to hear what Steve has to say?
Well, I do want to hear what Steve has to say, I guess, but I also, you know, in terms of creating a list of criteria under which we'd proceed, I really think it's important to acknowledge that while these are public funds, the process has to accept the role of the bond market. And I think it would be nice and clean to treat the assets funded by public funds, whether they're the state fiber assets that were built under other public funds, or these assets funded under ARPA funds, should really be treated in the same way and should not be treated so differently from other municipal initiatives. You know, there are other municipal initiatives like water and sewer districts or others. Like, what happens if those entities can't meet their obligations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because if the CUD can't make the obligation, and then does that somehow trigger the obligation of every municipal as a member of that CUD, which would really discourage municipals from joining the CUDs?
Yeah,
it's this cascading effect of.
We need to know that, and that's not in the field of expertise of anybody in the room.
I think that might be the difference here is with those other entities, they can access general obligation funds, and CUDs by law are prohibited. But that's something we do need to look into. But Steve does have his hand up and is ready to speak if we do want to hear from him.
We ready to hear from him, Brian, Holly? Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, we're talking a lot about EC Fiber and their experience and addressing their long-term focus. Please bear in mind that most of the CUDs will not be in a position to access the bond market for a while. So I would ask you to, as you begin your diligence, to look not only at what the bond market thinks about this language, but also talk to some lenders, some banks, to ascertain whether or not they would be agreeable to the language as well. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Huffaker, in making a grant to your organization, we asked that you bring us feedback from any banks, the banks that you were proposing to do business with. Did you have the opportunity to do that?
We have thrown ourselves on your wisdom to determine a final solution that will ensure that we have access to funding, be it bond or bank funding. So at this point, it seems to us that it has gone well beyond our abilities. I have Magna Dodge, who has worked in financing, and she certainly is going to try to keep us on the right path. But the directions or recommendations I'm making now are just to ask that you ensure that you've vetted this through the potential lenders, all potential lenders, including banks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any more?
Yeah, if there's no more discussion, I think we have, you know, as staff, we have clear direction. So we will come back with the next board meeting with some proposed language based on following up with Paul Giuliani, and you know, we can speak with some banks, both Vita and some national cooperative banks.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay. Thank you. And I will move now to the next state legislation issue, and that is bill number 166. And that is a bill to propose enhanced cleanup provisions for construction sites. It would require the PUC to revise rules to include enhanced consumer protection provisions related to the cleanup of utility construction sites. It would make sure that all construction contracts contain terms and conditions specifying standards and responsibility for worksite cleanup. And unless specified otherwise, the utility would be liable for all accidents environmental cleanup, damages, or injuries to any person or property resulting from construction, maintenance, repair, operation, or use of the utilities facilities. The bill proposes that a violation of the rule or a contract provision that results in harm or injury to any person or property would be an unfair act in commerce. Staff seeks a motion from the board to support this bill.
I don't think it's appropriate. I'm sorry.
Good, Holly.
I don't think it's appropriate for us to be supporting or not supporting this bill, please. This is good contract management. And I think as the VCBB, we should have standard provisions that we recommend to our CUDs. And they should include that subcontractors clean up their mess. But I don't think that we should come out in favor of this bill or not. It's just not necessary. It's not our, we don't have a dog in this fight. And frankly, I think this is a bill that responds to a specific situation that happened. And it is now opening the door to the Attorney General having a foothold through the consumer protection laws, so the Attorney General can get involved. This seeks to make a utilities failure to put this or to broach these PSD rules. Sorry, not the PSD, the PUC. So if there is a violation of these cleanup rules, mm-hmm. and there isn't a contractual provision that fixes it, it becomes actionable under the consumer protection laws, and that means the Attorney General's office can get involved. Well, the cure, to my mind, is the thing that CUDs should be doing every day, all day anyway, and that is to make sure that they've got good standards and protections in their contracts, spoken like a contract lawyer, I suppose. But I don't think that we should get involved in this conversation.
I agree with Holly.
Yeah, not understanding the background on this bill, the first time I'm seeing it, you know, I don't see why the VCBB would weigh in on something like this at all.
Brian, just for a little snippet of context, when I was on the board of EC Fiber, there was a situation with a subcontractor to a subcontractor to a contractor, and they left some bits of wire in a field, and there's an allegation that that wire was consumed by cattle or milk herd. You may have heard this story, and you know, there's been a lot of goodwill squandered on litigation in this scenario, but that's a personal opinion. The legislature is now making it, going one step further to try to make it so that the Attorney General's office can get involved. Yep. In a situation like this.
Yeah, I think we should stand down. I agree with Holly.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. And thank you, Stan and Christine, for informing us of the proposed legislative changes.
Yep. I don't, Rob, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't have any problem with the board's position on this.
It's the board's prerogative.
Yeah. Okay.
So I put that in the bucket of informed. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. The next bill is a bill to authorize temporary open meeting law procedures, basically to allow open meetings to be electronic only, which means that we, as a board, would not have to have a physical location for our meetings. We could be totally electronic. It has been approved by the Senate, and now it just needs to be signed by the governor. We'll wait and see whether he signs it.
Is that true that it expires on the 15th?
That's as
2023.
Oh,
Yeah,
23, okay.
Fire next, yeah, it's
Jeez, I missed that. I saw
basically
20
for a year only, yeah.
And you believe this would apply to us and all CUDs?
It would apply to us. I believe it would also apply to the CUDs, yes.
Okay.
Is the board okay with us complying with this?
So we're not putting forth the bill. We're just, if the bill comes to pass, we'll comply with this. Is that all?
Yeah. Yeah, it allows for it. It just want to make sure the board's okay with it if we go completely virtual. I'm sitting in Montpelier right now. Of course, there are no,
Yep.
it really just affects me because I'm the only one that's coming to Montpelier. So,
Right.
Got it.
so if the board's okay with me being virtual.
I think that you're hearing unanimous. Yes, we're okay with that.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Okay. Stan, is there one here?
Last but not least, Bill number 167. We're not exactly sure what this is meant to do, but it would extend the date by which to achieve 100 speeds from the end of 2024 to the end of 2029, and was introduced by Senator Brock earlier this month. Just wanted to inform the board that it's out there.
Does anybody have any background on this? Like, where is this coming from?
I think it's coming from the argument that the current goal is 2024, and that's not realistic for the entire state to be 100 by 100. So it's just aligning it with a more realistic goal. It could also be that this is a bill that is going to have a few additional things added onto it during committee process.
Yeah, and I was
just being aware of.
Yeah, in one of my testimonies to JITAC, I think it was either August or September, it came up that one person from the public stated in the that we had to meet this by the end of 2024. I said it's not happening. So it's a law of physics here. So I'm not sure where it entered into legislation, but I'm sure it was a few years past.
Because we know a factual reality, should we actually move to support this bill? We know that 2029 is objectively a better goal than 2024.
As it stands right now. Christine, you're testifying to Senate Finance this week, correct?
Yes.
I think Thursday.
Yes, so if I get a resolution,
so I'm sure we'll know more then.
That'd be great.
Brian and Dan, do you agree with Christine's analysis that 2024 is not realistic based on what you know?
I agree. Unless there was some.
I agree. My internet's in and out. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, good. No, I'm sorry. Everybody froze on my end, so I wasn't sure if I was still connected. Thank you. Sorry. I think I heard, bring me up to speed. I'm sorry. I think I heard we should pass a resolution.
I said, should we move to support it or pass the resolution? Maybe we don't want to get in the habit of voting up or down on every piece of legislation that floats by. But since this is particularly in our bailiwick, and our executive director is going to state the opinion on the legislative record that we cannot meet 2024, perhaps we should make a motion to support this legislation, and then Christine, you go into the committee meeting with that support.
Just to clarify, I think we should support this provision. It's the only provision in the legislation right now, but a lot can happen in committee. So maybe not support the bill, but support changing the 2024 to 2029.
So
moved.
Wait, we're not moving anything yet, right? We're still discussing.
Well, we could make a motion, then discuss it, but okay, fine. You don't want to get involved, Brian?
No, I just I think having Christine testify that 2024 is not feasible unless there was some, unforeseen game changer that were to occur between now and then. I think that's fine. There's nothing legislative about that. That's the ED and the expert in this area giving expert testimony to that. So I think that's great. 2029, I mean, we'd all love to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll definitely get that done. But I don't even know what the definition here is. The definition 100 by 100 to every single location in
It
Vermont.
is.
Okay. So every single one, 100%, not 99.9, not 99.8.
Okay.
So there, I'm gonna call a little bit of nonsense on that, because we've all discussed it. There are some locations in Vermont that are unlikely to ever get that, just because of the physics and the construction requirements. So what are we doing? I mean, this is just a kick. This is the kick the can thing, and I hate kicking the can. I think Christine should be prepared to expertly speculate about what year it may happen, and then qualify that with something less than 100.00, and leave it at that. And then let the legislature do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, let them do what they want to do. I agree.
This is a bill, though, that I think Christine and Rob are suggesting, we may want to continue to have an eye on as it evolves. And I agree, Brian, I'm sorry that we don't even have enough information to say when it should be done by. And it's making me think, and Dan is as sitting chair, as sitting chair, I'm hoping that we can put a legislative section in our agenda every week from now until the end of the legislature.
Very good idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Just like we need the parking lot piece to come up every week. Yes, I saw that smile, Christine.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry, we forgot it.
So, Christine and Rob and Stan, I presume we'll see that on the next agendas, please.
Yes, along with the parking lot.
Yep.
Certainly, we may know more soon.
Yep.
I'm assuming it'll come up this week.
All right. So it's 9:46, and thank you for the updates. I think we're done with this area.
Yes.
So let's move on to financial report.
Sure. Let me pull them up on the screen here. This is the first. We've got a reporting system in place. So let me. This will be the first report. My plan. We'll be able to have these reports done by the 10th of each month. So every board meeting after the 10th, I will come in and present the financial update to the board. I just want to present the format and get your feedback at this point. So let me share my screen. And you all see the budget?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the $1.5 million that's allotted for our budget. You can see what's getting charged to the budget. In the future, I will narrow these down, but we don't have any other expenses in there right now. So I thought I'd show you the detail. Essentially, I'll take all these, the first 7 or 8 lines there and put it under salaries. But essentially, we haven't spent much, as you can see. So we may be carrying over funds until the following year, but that's understandable since we started late.
Is this I can't remember how the legislation reads. Is this July 1 to June 30th funding?
Yes. Yes.
1.5.
Yes.
I will make a comment, Christine, that not spending funds is not necessarily a good thing, as you know.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Yeah, we finally have a full staff and we're finally getting to work here. So, not that Rob and I haven't been working. So,
No.
Christine, just to correct, we are not at a full staff yet. We are still searching for the broadband
right.
project developer. Our only candidate withdrew, unfortunately.
There was a mention in the draft annual report about a team engineer. Is that the same as where is that position? What is that position?
That engine, we've allocated $100,000 in the budget for a fiber optic engineer, which does come out of this budget.
Okay.
So that's an RFP that will soon be posted. The procurement process within the state can be challenging and take a lot of time, but that will be posted likely by the end of the day today or tomorrow. But the board had decided they wanted it to be a contract versus an employee.
Okay.
I have no problem with this budget as long as it's complete, given the cost codes that the state would expect to see.
Yeah, as I look at this, it seems like it would make sense to do budget versus actual side by side. However,
yes, please.
Yeah,
would help a lot.
Yep, that'll be how the format I'll present the next time. Yeah. Okay, moving on to. Can I move on to H315?
Please.
Okay, so these funds were transferred. We're transferred over from the DPS. These were the original 1.6 million, which we've been working on, which you've been allocating capacity building through pre-construction grants. Rob, what was the other support?
So this isn't the version that was in the legislative report, but the other support was related to additional support we can provide the CUDs. This was going to be for grant writing when we thought USDA was going to be more of an option at this point. So it is still support that is pending. I'm not sure where that $37,000 is in your column there, but it's other support for the CUDs. And the relay service, it's the, I can't remember what the correct name of it is.
It's the RCC, the relay.
RCC, yeah, relay captioning service.
Yeah.
Captioning.
Okay.
So I'm never going to be able to follow this personally if it doesn't have the source of the funding. When you start talking about it, Rob, I get confused about whether you're talking about assistance from the VCBB or actual funds that are coming into the VCBB coffers. So other support, like we've seen this in various forms, but I'm just specifying that we got to come down on a consistent way of expressing where the source, not just type, but where the source of the funding is coming from, that are revenues into the VCBB.
Well, the source is from H315. This isn't revenue that's coming in to it. Christine has CUD capacity building. Those were grants that were issued already.
Oh, so you're just talking about, I'm sorry.
Actually,
I'm sorry that if I'm confusing things. I'm back in trying to do the budget, right? So
yeah,
this is so give me
okay.
a better framework.
Okay, let me take a step back. Before the VCBB was created last spring, H315 was passed. It was for interim support. As part of that, there was the H315 CUD pre-construction and capacity building grant program. That's first budget line. It's paid 50% up front, 50% at the end. Also in that bill, there was additional support for the CUDs that could either be staff or contract. That was the amount allocated to that was combined with the RCC and the renewal of hotspots. So it's been as the expenses come in from the RCC, the amounts have been changing a little bit, but that is money that we have yet to spend. As we have many ideas, and then the length of time it takes for contracting or the situation on the ground changes. So it is another pot of money we have available. You can ignore everything on there about the relay service and hotspot renewable and the CUD capacity. The only thing that's helpful right now to look at is that where it says 83,965 for other CUD support. That is something that we could use for whether it's additional outside legal support, whether it's fundraising support, whatever we want to use it from, it's at our disposal. I hope that was a little clear. It might not have been.
So those funds are not committed yet.
They are not committed. They're committed to the VCBB to use, but they're not committed to a specific use at this point.
Okay.
We were going to use them for USDA Reconnect for fundraising help, but it doesn't appear most CUDs are going to be able to take advantage of it this round.
Okay, and the CUD capacity building remaining 838,000, that is committed.
That is all obligated and committed and with grant agreements.
Okay.
So Dan and Brian, your choice, but to me, something about the way this is set up is not helpful to me. Although if it's the obligation of the VCBB to oversee the allocation of uncommitted funds, I guess we had better have a report on it, right?
Yeah, I will tell you, I'll give you, when I do the next month's report, as Rob just described it, that $83,000 is remaining. I will put it on our budget side as available to us. And I'll make sure I, cross-reference it. So you really have, what I'm hearing is two different things, right? One is we want to make sure we can manage the H315 funds and show where that's going. But at the same time, if that $83,000 is available for us, it should go into our overall budget. And then the board can determine, we can determine where it gets spent. So I'll reformat this so it's more understandable next month.
So the unobligated remaining column, shouldn't that reflect more closely the 83 or 84,000?
Yes. Yeah, and this is a report that comes out of the state, so I'll go through and make it work for us.
Okay.
Because that is confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Holly or Brian, any other questions on this one?
Nope.
Okay.
And then, of course, we're familiar with this one because we just went through it, but we have, $8,704,000 remaining in pre-construction funds to allocate, and we've got 3 CUDs, Rob, who haven't come forward yet, or 2?
I believe it's 2. I think it's just Otter Creek and Southern Vermont.
Yep.
Otter Creek, I've been told to expect a proposal, but it has not arrived yet. I'm speaking with them this week. And I believe Southern Vermont is waiting to see the results of the NTIA grant. They've applied for jointly with Consolidated, and the latest information we've heard on that is that answer should be coming the very end of January or middle of the February, but it was originally coming in November. So talk about deadlines slipping.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
If no other questions, then
I'm going to need to take a quick bio break here.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, I think you're on the next one as well, correct? Federal legislation and rulemaking.
Yes.
Okay. We'll take a 3-minute break. Three minutes. Right.
Okay, I can think straight now.
Doing the dance.
So Christine, do you want to not share your screen so Stan can take over
Oh, yeah.
with this
Yeah,
presentation? And then, so I think the NTIA questions are at the end.
Oh, okay. Sorry. In the wrong place.
Brian will be back shortly.
So are we done with the financial report?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I don't think any approvals are necessary there. That was an inform.
Yeah. So it would be great. I mean, I do want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to review how much we've gotten out the door and what sources of funding are available to CUDs. That's super. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll format it in a way that's more understandable. I just took the existing, obviously I'm gonna have to do some work on the reports, which is fine.
Okay. Ryan is back. Stan, were you going to lead this?
Yeah, I can start. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is an overview of the federal legislative and regulatory activities going on. The first one I'm going to talk about is the IIJA, as I call it, the Infrastructure Act that was enacted in November, which had $65 billion for new investment in broadband, including $42 billion in the BEAD program, $1 billion for middle mile competitive grants, $14 billion for the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which will be renamed the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP, and I'll talk about that next. And a $1.25 billion in a new competitive grant program for broadband. But the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, was designed to be the successor to the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. Will reduce the value that folks can get from $50 a month to $30. But eligibility is broadened. Some recipients who got the emergency broadband benefit will have to reapply for the ACP, but there are instructions on the USAC, on the FCC's website about how to do that. Eligible households can also receive a discount of up to $100 for equipment for laptop, desktop, or tablet from a participating provider. Participation requirements, you must be at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines or participate in certain assistance programs such as SSI or Medicaid, Lifeline. Be approved to receive benefits under the USDA free and reduced price school lunch and breakfast programs, or have a Pell Grant during the award year, or meet the eligibility criteria for a existing low income program by the participating provider, by the ISP. Service providers will use the program's claims processed that they get to through the USAC portal each month to seek reimbursement for the consumers who received these programs. The FCC just issued draft rules about this on January 7th. And I'm posing the question to the board, should the VCBB take action to promote this program, and if so, what? For instance, should it provide assistance to CUDs to become participating providers, develop surveys of providers regarding their participation or obstacles to participating, or encourage households to apply for the ACP?
Yeah, so let's take a
should also
pause.
say that the final Treasury rules for the ARPA funds requires participation in this program if you're receiving broadband funds. So that was something that is in the RFP now. It's just another piece of background.
Yeah, and the question, the reason the question for the board members is what we're, you know, with this right now, this program, the EBB program has a pretty low take rate. You know, Rob just gave me a number of 4% this morning. I heard 3% at the national level in a meeting I was at last week. So, you know, it's an important program. But Rob, I want to share with the board your thoughts about some of the difficulties with the program you were sharing with me this morning.
Yeah, I wanted to hear what the board thought of how we can encourage, not just we are going to encourage the CUDs and any eligible provider is going to have to participate, but what's the use of participating if the Vermonters that need the service don't know about it, can't sign up for it. So it sounds like there's process challenges, both in getting Vermonters to sign up and from the point of view of the broadband provider in getting reimbursements, of getting them integrated into the system. And Holly might have more information on this, but I feel like it's an important thing we need to be aware of and potentially take some action to smooth things along to make sure all Vermonters can benefit from our program.
Holly?
For the last year, I've been the president of a group called Equal Access to Broadband, which is a nonprofit funded by EC Fiber and other private contributors to assist low-income households in accessing these subsidies. The first point is that it is so difficult for low-income families to access these subsidies that you need a nonprofit to help them. The second point is that part of the reason why there's a low take rate is because to appropriately register and assist low-income families to access these subsidies is in fact a social service. And most CUD or ISP entities are not set up for that kind of work. It's very time consuming. The run rate to establish registration for a family is cumulatively about an hour and 45 minutes per household. It is not the kind of thing that's built into your sales telephone customer response time in a commercial entity. The third thing I would say is that the reduction of the subsidy from $50 a month to $30 a month negatively impacts access to broadband in a rural market like ours. We think that we at Equal Access to Broadband think that individual ISPs may find it necessary to add subsidies to it. And finally, I would say that I personally have addressed this issue to various social services agencies and nonprofits, and they don't have the time, the bandwidth, or the understanding, not to make a pun, to be providing this additional service on top of food, heat, shelter, and other social service requirements. So you can promote this, but the physical reality is you need to access the internet. You need to be able to prove that you qualify, and that usually requires uploading documentation. And you are asking people that don't necessarily have access to the technology or the digital skills to register in a federal program. That's not easy. Just wanted to give you the cold, harsh reality, and that's why we run Equal Access to Broadband now in its second year. The obligation under the ARPA funds to qualify under the federal program are very interesting because, of course, you can't really qualify until you're a carrier. First, most of our CUDs need to carefully examine whether they are in fact the carrier of record, or if it's their operating partner. Who would the public see as the provider? That's one of the tests imposed by the FCC on who the carrier of record is. The second thing that's true is, even if you are I'm thinking of NEK and the fact that they are now providing service, congratulations to them. This is a whole additional level of work that somebody has to do. If your operator is doing that work anyway, maybe your contract in operations requires them to provide this subsidy service, and maybe not. That's it for me. So can we promote it? We can promote it. If you're listening carefully to VPR, somebody has suggested to them that they promote it. And so they are putting on the air, hey, check out the broadband subsidy on this webpage. But I don't know that that's the most effective thing to do. The other thing that I think is most required is financial literacy for families who would get a subsidy program, to not understand money, but to understand what telecom opportunities they have to reduce their costs. So do you need cell phone service, landline service, cable service, and internet connectivity? Where are there cost savings opportunities? That would be really useful.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you. So I guess the question is the board is where do we go from here and when?
I'd like to know how you're going to impose the ARPA condition of registration for the ACP program.
We've already spoken with Guidehouse, the consultants, and the intention to apply and to become a member of it is enough. But I do believe within the grant agreements, we will want, that's going to be one of the items we're going to ask them to report on is what is their status? What is their progress towards being able to accept this? Since many of the groups are still at least several months out to providing service.
Yeah, that begs the question, Holly, that from what you just described, we can require compliance and with the program. But if the CUDs or the providers aren't capable of providing the proper assistance to the low-income families, then we really haven't met the intent of the program, have we?
Well, I think you have a challenge, and I don't want to sound like I'm making an advertisement for equal access to broadband. I mean, we have a lot of work already, and we're looking to make this a function that's available to all CUDs. And some of the smaller telcos have even said, "Hey, we could use some help in this area." But I do think that the intention to make a plan or a plan might be the appropriate level of engagement on the CUD end.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I believe some of the funds that are coming via the infrastructure bill could be used for even staffing or consulting to help this process along. Like there's a lot of questions I don't have answers to yet. There is the open question of how much staff time is available to answer those and the millions of other questions we have to answer and determine the roles of. But it's something we should be aware of now.
So
I'm wondering if we might be able to provide some funding to equal access to broadband to have them take on that task. Is that? I'm not asking a question. I'm not asking you to answer that question, Holly, but is that a reasonable route to take?
Well, we're going to have a competitive process if we decide to contract for service for that. Also, I just heard from Patty. She's going to be joining momentarily.
Okay. So it's my understanding that the carrier of record is the recipient of these funds. So it's in their enlightened interest to take these actions to make sure that they can get access to the $30 here, the $5 there, any grant dollars that are available, and any assistance perhaps from equal access to broadband, I'm sure would be appreciated. And I think that's where it lies, predominantly not here at the board. If there's funding requests, then to cover costs, actual costs, I guess those could be made. Rob, I don't know what the process is to make that happen, but if it has to be an RFP, so be it. I would be agreeable to helping fund essentially what equates to a marketing campaign to bring these folks into the fold further to help the CUD's take rate.
And some of that may be happening from the Department of Public Service side of things, but I think there's processes that need to be examined as well. Okay,
so to not duplicate efforts, but to complement efforts, I think would be a good thing. Holly?
So I was just going to mention to you that the department just did a study of the distribution of low-income households, and because I wondered, and so did they, whether low-income households might in fact be more predominantly present in areas without broadband. And the fact of the matter is they are not. They're pretty much equally distributed. So this isn't an issue specific to CUDs, and therefore it need not be an issue specific to VCBB. The other thing to kind of mention here is just that in our experience at Equal Access to Broadband, we have found that the best point of contact for low-income families is not a public media campaign, but is rather to work through supervisory district, union districts in the school systems, their technical managers in the school systems, and some of the community action agencies, which are aggregators of information for that population.
Yep, that makes sense.
Hey folks, I just wanted to let you know that Patty joined. I apologize for being late. Dan, why don't you go ahead and continue to run the meeting since we're well underway.
Okay, thank you. Welcome aboard.
I thought it was at noon and I've been digging out and trying to unbury my cars and taking care of the animals here.
Perfect. So then next steps here, Stan. Do you have anything more to cover on the rest of these slides? I think you kind of heard from myself and Holly. I don't know, Brian, if you had any other comments you wanted to add. No. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Then we can move on to the next issue if no one else has any more thoughts about the ACP.
Okay.
And that is the NTA requesting comment on broadband programs in the Act. Oops. And I think I have a list of the questions, but Christine had those up on her slide.
They're in the packet.
Yeah, they're in the packet. They're in the packet. There's a list of 36 questions. They're due on February 4th. And the Public Service Department is planning to provide comments and has asked that as possible, the VCBB submit comments together with them. So we plan to meet with them next week to talk about the issues and see if there are any areas where things may, where our interests might not align. But
we're also coordinating with Vermont League of Cities and Towns and potentially others that might submit comments.
Good.
Yeah, and I've been on 2 sessions with the State Broadband Leaders Network through on this as well. There's kind of a common theme that formed with the State Broadband Leaders Network, and one is there is a preference to support community networks, and there's also a strong concern about the accuracy of the data. That's kind of what's evolving at the national level.
The accuracy of NTIA's data?
The accuracy of the FCC data that's being used to allocate the funds.
Okay.
So I didn't know if the board had any had a chance to look at the questions and had wanted to weigh in on specifics of the questions at this point before we.
You know, for me personally, and Dan, pardon me for hopping in, it would be really useful to understand, you can read through these things and they seem pretty milquetoast. It might be useful if staff has clarity on where some of the issues are in this long list of very poorly worded questions. I mean, some of this stuff I don't think our board is primed to comment on. So are there areas of focus that staff thinks are issues that we should be discussing?
I think we'll be in better shape in the next meeting after we, do some deep dives on this. However, in general, I would say, that only speaking for myself at this point, well, I probably am speaking for the staff, but I'll say, I think that the data accuracy question is the big one, and Vermont you know, we're doing a better job than the rest of the nation in terms of how you manage data, but our data still, you know, we still lack confidence in our data.
I just wanted to add that if we're coordinating with the department, there's not going to be a next morning where any of the answers we provide can be reviewed and changed. So that's why we wanted to bring these questions to the attention of the board now to see if there was anything in particular you wanted us to mention, or if we should just follow along on with working with the department and on our own knowledge base to answer these questions and then to submit. It was more giving the board an opportunity.
Yeah, and I would add that you have an opportunity to just send emails directly to me with your concerns as well. If you want to take some time to go through that.
So the CUDs may also want to take a look at these questions and respond.
So
yeah, some of these questions are ground we've covered ourselves. I mean, there's affordability stuff, there's technical assistance, there's educational stuff. So yeah, I guess my view would be if staff wanted to just reflect our prior discussions in responses, share that with the department and see what can be jointly supported. You know, that's a reasonable first step.
Yeah.
So I think along with what Brian is saying, I would really love to know that the staff isn't going to give just a blanket support to the department's comments, but rather, you know, specific areas. And one of the things that seems right to me is that I was recently approached for comments on a grant directly to Topsham Telephone, and in the process of evaluating that request, I realized that there is no overarching view of where the funding initiatives are and what's happening unless the department is gathering those. And so from my point of view, this begs the question about a statewide plan. You know, how do we know what's being funded and to whom and by whom? And these questions speak to inclusivity of lots of different types of entities. So if I was going to make a comment, one of them would be that this kind of funding should get a letter of recommendation, for example, from the VCBB, just so you know that it's happening. That's a thought anyway. I thought the other thing that one of the questions, number 5, I guess, it talks about what technical assistance would be helpful. And I hope that that you all will make a comment about where technical assistance should apply. But one of the types of technical assistance might be better planning or aggregation of information.
So I think you guys have commented on this already and made the points. One was it's kind of milquetoast. I mean, this is a lot of boilerplate response, in my opinion. We probably individually could respond to all of the questions. Brian's comments, the same. If the staff and the department, this is my input here, if the staff and the department were to coordinate, and I presume with the CBD's input, perhaps we can see a draft of what that response would look like for our information. But it really is a lot of, we've been here before, boilerplate responses. Like Holly mentioned, coordination of communication.
Yeah, we'll be glad to share, you know, get a draft and share it with the board and give you time to, you know, send your individual comments in after we meet with the department. And the other concern that I have, and you know, it actually is I'm concerned about it. It ties to the data accuracy. You know, I'm concerned about what I would like to see, and we're asking for it with our CUDs, is being able to have, you know, real-time monitoring of your network. So when you know, to qualify today for saying you have broadband, it's done through self-reporting. which, we know the technology is capable of, any new system putting in of reporting in real time what the performance is. So I would like to, this gets to what we're calling out for standards is when we get a fiber network, it's a fused network. It's capable of performing at the same level as our electrical network. So I think we setting higher standards for what we expect for performance from telecom companies, kind of starting where we, started the meeting from, talking about some of our failures that are happening in the state as we speak.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would offer more specific comments in the areas of questions 13 and 14, where we're talking about resilience. Cybersecurity is always an important part, so on and so forth. I don't believe there will be time here to get into the details of those. And I think, out of the 36 comments, if we individually had specific areas we wanted to provide feedback in, we each can do that to Christine and Rob and Stan. Barring that, what else do we want to?
Well, Dan, kick it out there. I'd love to hear from you and Brian on what you think the performance standard should be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we want to take time here, but
well, no, they just sent it in.
Along the lines of what you just described, the way the electric grid is constructed for reliability and resilience is an important part of what our communications infrastructure should not only achieve, but actually beyond that, because you can create rings and higher degrees of resilience, and that communications infrastructure, critical infrastructure, is important for the grid today and especially for what's coming in the future.
Well, we welcome your thoughts.
Okay. I'll get you my thoughts. Do we have any more discussion that we want to have on the NTIA questions, the 36 questions?
Can I just ask something about what Christine said about monitoring directly what the standards of performance are? I'm interested in the board members' view on that, because I don't think the VCBB is going to live forever. So are we supposed to have visibility on performance for the next 5 years? And then, I mean, is that something we should truly expect? Because I don't think the VCBB will live on as the sort of network knock,
I'll offer my input there. Is the networks that are being built with the grant dollars today should have real-time monitoring for what's happening. They should know, just like today, if you have AMI smart grid meters in the house, the power system, they know which houses are without power.
Okay.
That information should be made available, maybe as a SAIDI metric or some metric to show what the quality of service that the customer received. I use SAIDI or K. There are a bunch of utility metrics, but I think that could be applied, and I think it should be reported. That should probably be reported to the department, who would take this on in a reporting mechanism. To the extent that you can force carriers to give you real-time reporting, I don't think that's probably ever going to happen, but I don't know. That would probably, that's regulation that is a different conversation. But having performance metrics, I think, is a baseline, and it should be incorporated into the original design of these networks as they're constructed, which I'm confident many of them are considering.
Thank you.
I think as those responses come in, let me add to that, please. As those responses come in, that should be something we're looking at, is, do you have these tools in place in your proposed network design?
And certainly I'm not opposed. I'm not suggesting in any way that I'm opposed to a grant condition being, reporting from such a system. And so I think, and if it requires us to view a report or have it delivered in a particular format, that's fine too.
Yeah, I would just mimic, I agree with Dan. I just mimic what's already exists, which is you're not going to do, I don't think we're asking them to do real-time reporting. I think we're asking them to do periodic reporting on real-time monitoring. So that, once a month or once a quarter or, whatever the time frame that wants to be defined, they're letting us know all those basic reliability and connectivity metrics across their customers.
Thank you. Good input.
Okay. Any more discussion on this item? Okay. So each of us, if we have comments we want to make specifically, we can forward those to the staff. To Christine, please. Does that bring us to staff updates, or is there something that
I still have some more federal issues to talk about.
I'm sorry, Stan, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the federal broadband sphere, unfortunately for some. The Infrastructure Act also, I wanted to point out, we've identified one potential conflict between a provision in it and Act 71 that we just wanted to bring to your attention. Under the Infrastructure Act, a granting entity may not exclude cooperatives, nonprofits, etc., including public utilities, private companies. Act 71, however, permits grants to non-CUDs only if they don't conflict with CUD's plans. So we need to analyze whether there's a workaround here or this provision can be harmonized with the Infrastructure Act.
Stan, I'm sorry, my brain isn't keeping up. The IIJA is not the ARPA funds, it's the new funds.
It's, yes.
Okay. And so this is not an issue with the funding that we have that's existing.
Right.
Wouldn't you also agree that Act 71, Section 8086E doesn't preclude these other entities? It puts
Absolutely.
a condition.
Yes, and that is the argument that I was, developing in my head, was that it's not precluded, so it doesn't exclude these. It's just limits them. So that may be the workaround.
It doesn't even limit them. It just puts a condition on their participation, right?
Yes.
Was there some issue, Stan, with the speed requirements? How the new infrastructure bill requires only 100/20? And there's other things in Act 71 that would, like, for instance, prohibit any entity that operates in more than 5 counties from participating. Is that going to be a problem? We know, so it's brought up in a discussion with the department where they saw some potential issues here.
Does the department have a plan for how they think they want to reconcile that, Rob?
I don't believe at this point there's a plan. It's more of just know that we should be aware that there may be some challenges with our participation in this. There may at some point need to be some changes within Act 71 to align with this federal legislation that contains some preemption, it sounds like. So it's more of awareness at this point, but further analysis is necessary. We also don't have the final rules, and who knows when we will. But it's to be aware of, so we don't end up in a situation where we have this funding, but Act 71 prohibits us from issuing grants related to it.
Okay, Patty?
I assume if there's a conflict, that the federal legislation overrides state. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do we have to have, would we actually have to have a change in Act 71, or given that federal law trumps state law, we would go with the federal?
Under preemption law, I think the federal law would trump it, and then you wouldn't have to make a change to the state law. It just wouldn't apply.
I'm not sure if that's accurate, because we have to apply for the funding from the infrastructure bill. And if our rules aren't in alignment with it, I don't know if we can apply.
Well, I'm quite sure you could apply. You just have to have a reason why it's not a direct conflict, because that preemption rule only applies where it's a direct conflict. So Stan, your work's cut out for you here.
In the meantime,
In the meantime,
I would suggest that the CUDs prepare to carefully project management their deployments, because there may be a deployment. I'm just recommending that there may be a deployment in an area that may be on the fringe of this 20 or 25 megabit criteria. And by managing your project and separating those, we can still allocate dollars in any way we like to the areas that are clearly in our portfolio, and those that are not, that they can use more bond or other funding mechanisms to get to those other areas. But managing the projects carefully, I think, will still achieve the deployment of the dollars to the areas that need it most, and then they can allocate the private sources of funding differently. Just a recommendation.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that will be helpful is the department is going to be reaching back out to providers, asking for a new tier of 100, the 120 tier for reporting available speeds. I don't know what the time frame is for that data being available, but it may help with this process.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to in addition to the Infrastructure Act, there's the state and local fiscal recovery funds under ARPA. Last May, the department issued interim final rules for these programs, and last week they adopted final rules, which will become effective in April 1st. A key component was broadband infrastructure, and the final rule significantly broadens eligible broadband infrastructure investments to invest challenges with access, affordability, and reliability. And though they don't become effective till April, the Treasury will not challenge if you are consistent with the terms of the final rule now. So recipients can fund high-speed broadband infrastructure in areas of need that the recipient identifies, including lack of access to reliable high-speed broadband connection, lack of affordable broadband, and lack of reliable service. So that's a pretty broad scope. There are just some prohibited uses. You can't offset or reduce taxes based on state law, can't service debt, and can't satisfy settlements or judgments or other uses that violate ARPA or state or local laws. Recipients are required to design projects that are 100-100 symmetrical. Where it's not practicable, they can be 120 and be scalable to 100 symmetrical.
And Stan, there is a typo on this slide. It looks like Act 71 requires 100 by 100, not 100 by 20.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sorry that we didn't catch that earlier.
Gotcha. If recipients are considering deploying broadband to locations where there are existing and enforceable commitments for at least 120, They have to ensure that these funds are designed to address a need that's not met by the existing commitments. Recipients must ensure that the funds may not be used for costs that will be reimbursed by other federal or state funding streams. They're encouraged to prioritize investments in fiber optic wherever feasible and to focus on projects that will achieve last mile connections. Further, they're encouraged to prioritize support for networks owned, operated, or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and co-ops. Completed projects must participate in a low-income subsidy program, such as the ACP that we talked about earlier. And they may be used for modernization of cybersecurity, including hardware and software. And Treasury also encourages recipients to meet other requirements such as strong labor standards, project labor agreements, community benefits agreements, etc. And that wraps up the federal overview for today.
Okay.
Are you getting much information from the CUDs, Rob or Stan, about concerns they have for this funding structure?
At this point, no. Part of the purpose for today was to try to get everybody closer to being on the same page. I don't think this is going to impact anything with our current program. That'll be launched later today, except for that it's a requirement that you participate in the broadband subsidy or an equivalent program. But it's more about being aware of these changes and possible challenges, and then preparing for stuff with the infrastructure funds.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Is that everything, Stan?
That is everything for now.
Okay. All right. Christine, moving on to staff updates.
Yes, we're presenting to Senate Finance on Thursday, and you know we're prepared to. We've got that pretty much prepared. It's really a status update of where we are. The workforce development program has developed. I think it developed enough inertia where it's going to keep moving. You know, we've got the Department of Labor, ACCD involved. We met with Pat Moulton, the head of VTC. We're meeting with CCV. So now our focus is now looking at shorter term needs. What are we going to need for labor for construction season? You know, we've got these development programs to fill in a labor pipeline, but that's going to take time. So on the shorter term, we've met with Communication Workers of America. They seem to think they're going to be able to provide some resources from people who are retired and people who aren't currently working. So we're hoping to get resources out of CWA. We're also reaching out to our federal delegation about possible other solutions, which I'd rather not talk about publicly right now. You've heard we're finishing up on the fiber optic engineer RFP. We've got, as Rob said, we didn't get anybody for the broadband project developer, so Rob is working to reach out further on that. What else, Rob?
The RFP will be posted later today. We had to make those few changes. We're also have to make a few changes that are impacted by the budget address happening this afternoon. We can tell you more about that at 11. But yeah, some exciting updates.
Yep.
We also have been speaking with the Northern Borders Regional Commission. The Rural Forest Economy Partnership grant had tied up some funds as a match, and we've applied for a match waiver that'll give us more flexibility in how we use those matches. The idea of the whole grant was to use these funds to leverage other programs, other financing, whether it's private investment or other federal programs, and that was challenging within the NBRC guidelines. So we're waiting to hear confirmation that we received that waiver, and that'll free up the 1.5 million grant program for more flexible uses, which is wonderful. Other than that, last week a lot of time was spent on the report to the legislature. Christine mentioned the broadband project developer. We're switching around the titles a little bit to find other candidates. So if you know of any candidates with experience in the bond market, new market tax credits, any kind of innovative financing, public, private, or whatever, please do point them our way. And
yeah, and I should add the GIS project. Alyssa is heading up our GIS project. That's moving along well. We've got the charter together, and I'm pretty happy with where that's headed. Thank you, Alyssa, for your leadership there.
We've also been working to get the GIS project fully underway. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, we're lucky that our executive, the person we hired for an executive assistant, has a GIS background.
She's been already proven herself to be an amazing part of the team, and way more than how the position was originally designed.
Oh yeah, and I should add, she also has a lot of experience with the state processes too. She's been wonderful.
We've also been working closely with the grants person that's now on staff at the department to streamline our processes, to make sure that the CUDs know who to reach out to with questions that are beyond my expertise when it comes to federal guidelines and reporting, and to centralize a lot of that reporting in terms of the financial and the checking up within that position, and ensuring that all the lines of communication are effective between us and the department when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I should add too that I put it in my update, but I want to make sure the board's okay with me attending the State Broadband Leaders Network meeting in Washington first couple days of March. I found that network to be pretty powerful. It is the state broadband leaders across the country.
Have you met Andrew from Maine? Pardon me, from Maine yet? I can't think of Andrew's last name.
I think we've been on calls together, but yeah, we know that he's new over there.
He's
we're
he's
working
pretty
closely
new.
with Peggy.
Yeah, good.
I've been working closely with Peggy Schaffer from Maine. She's been awesome, but Andrew is new. But I'm sure Maine has been working pretty closely with us.
Great.
Good.
We've also been following up on any and all other discussions with towns and CUDs and providers as we launch into this next phase of getting grant funding out there.
Okay. Excellent. Is that everything for updates on staff?
For now, we will have another update after Vakuda gives their update.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that as Dan, is it okay for me to proceed? Thank you. So a couple of things from the CUD end of the spectrum here. First, I'll say that our biggest hope and priority has to get a hold of the RFP. So I'm really glad to hear that today is the day, and I'm sure that my constituent CUDs feel the same way about that. So thank you for getting that online, and that's going to be our major task in the coming months to get funded for construction via that route. So a couple of other things. With regard to the legislation, the CUD Association has not taken up a position on Bill 166 yet either. I'm planning on having a discussion around this bill at our meeting this coming Monday, but as of yet, we haven't come to a consensus, and I'm not sure whether we're going to voice support for that bill yet or not. But we'll definitely have a discussion of it and evaluate our position. With regard to the other bill discussed from Senator Brock, We don't have a position on that yet either. Similar to the VCBB, we may end up not taking a stance on that date change one way or the other. However, personally, I do have some degree of caution when it comes to opening up the floor on Act 71 in the legislature. Because this legislation is favorable to us. We think it's a good policy, and we don't want it to be, the can of worms to be open when it comes to changing anything around in there, considering all the work that's been done already guided by that legislation. So definitely, we're going to continue to stress caution when it comes to dealing with that legislation. Moving on. As Christina alluded to, I worked with her and with Krista from NEK to collaborate with the Vermont Department of Labor to survey telecom companies, contractors, consultants, providers in and around Vermont to figure out exactly what our labor situation looks like. And the Department of Labor is going to issue their report today. My analysis is that we did not get the responses that we had hoped for, both in terms of the amount of respondents and in terms of the quality of their responses. However, there was a resounding support for apprenticeship programs, training programs run by VTC, Vermont Technical College, and the Department of Labor is going to use that evidence to support their request for further funding and expansion of that program. And as Christine mentioned, that program will likely be expanded in other colleges like Community College of Vermont as well. So, that's a net positive that splicing and line training program is going to be expanded because the survey did indicate there is great difficulty filling those positions as we had guessed, and that will definitely be beneficial in the long run. However, my other conclusion, which the Department of Labor is not going to focus on in their report, is that the contractors that are available to be hired by CUDs and other providers in Vermont in 2022, although they have a stable workforce and can get a lot of work done as they do every year, they do not have a lot of capacity to take on additional workforce. On average, these companies were looking to hire a few additional workers at most in terms of the capacity they have to train and to hire and to conduct work. To me, this is very concerning because the CUDs are going to be ramping up construction in a way that Vermont has not seen before. We know that capacity is going to need to be far greater, not just a few additional workers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing and hopefully working with you, Christine and Rob, as you explore these what sound like really innovative solutions to bring in some short-term, fast and effective labor force into the state. And on our end, I'm going to, as the CUDs apply for the RFP, construction RFP, complete their detailed design, figure out exactly where they stand on contracting in real time so that we know exactly what they have secured and what our deficit is. We tried to do that with this survey, but the nature of the company surveyed and the situation they're in meant that they weren't able to accurately project how much they'd be able to contract for in Vermont, to say it simply. So we don't know exactly how big this problem is, but I think that our analysis of this is clear that even with the expanded apprenticeship program, even if the companies that are in play are able to bring on the additional workers that they think they need now, it will not be enough, considering the fact that we now have, 7 CUDs that are going to be trying to construct 100 miles or more of fiber this year, in most cases 300 miles. It's a very large deficit, and I hope to have the exact numbers, and we'll continue to try and get them, but we're going to need an innovative solution if we want to keep pace with construction. So that's my message on that. I have a few more things to talk about, but I'm definitely happy to take some questions because I think we are a little bit ahead of time, but let me keep moving. With regard to the GIS, this may be just an issue for email to Alyssa, but I'll bring it up because I think it's an interesting topic for board and CUDs alike. With regard to the state's GIS program, is there any reason at this point why the CUDs, can the CUDs and myself have access to the charter with Stone Environmental or any other planning work that has been done for the state GIS program? Because we really want to get our minds around what it's going to look like so we can start working on that. So is that just a matter of emailing Alyssa and getting that info, or is there
Yes.
other issues at play?
Yep, I am sending it right now.
Oh, okay, perfect. That was a very quick solution. Okay, great. So I will start looking that over and getting that distributed to the CUDs so that we can collaborate with the VCBB to get the statewide program going. I'm very excited about it. I think it has potential not only for planning and design, but for public relations, which really suits me. So I think that that'll be good to get rolling. So thank you for that, Alyssa. Lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about the subject of discussion regarding, I can't remember the exact name of the legislation, the issue of reversion of assets and subsequently the issue of CUDs receiving third-party investments. I've been doing a lot of research and thinking about this issue. I appreciate the work that Stan has done, and I think it's moving in the right direction towards possibly finding a solution. And I also like the fact that the VCBB is going to be looking to Mr. Paul Giuliani for advice on the implications for this language in the bond market and his ideas for other language. I do think it's worth noting, as we've discussed before, we have met with Michael Gaughan from the Vermont Bond Bank, who thought that the language as it stands is going to be pretty disqualifying for that kind of investment in the CUDs. So I think that's all moving in the right direction, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. But I also think, and this is mainly my own ideas, this is not an official VCUDA position yet, at least, that it looks like we need a more innovative solution to this problem. And I was also thinking about this in light of repeated questions from CUDs about VEDA, Vermont Economic Development Authority, because both their regular commercial loan programs and their broadband expansion loan program are really not suitable to the CUDs for a number of reasons. The first being the reversion of assets means a complete conflict with Act 71 grant funding. And the second is that the interest rates are the same, if not sometimes higher, than those imposed by commercial banks. Which, given the mission of the Vermont Economic Development Authority, and given I'm not the expert, but it seems like this at least semi-public body created by the Assembly should have a more community public-oriented approach. My thinking is that the VCBB should collaborate with the Vermont Economic Development Authority, potentially with the Community Foundation and other partners as well, to start a fund for loan funding to CUDs and potentially other providers at lower interest rates, and designed in a way so that those loans will not conflict with grant funding from the VCBB. It seems to me that having this parallel loan fund to the community broadband grant funds would be a really effective way to fund the CUDs and solve this problem of having two first liens on the assets, as well as potentially solving the problem of the interest rates. The RUS, when I was with the USDA, the RUS used the same model, having grant funds in parallel with loan funds that would not conflict. So I continue to think that a centralized loan option for loan funding to the CUDs would be a really great, kind of one-size-fits-all solution to a lot of these problems. I'm happy to work with all the parties involved to try to make a plan for this. But I think that an innovative solution here, bringing these parties together, potentially even a public-private partnership with other entities, would be a really great way to solve this problem. So happy to discuss that further, and just think we need to find a solution to the VEDA issue, because we need another way to bring in funding, and it looks increasingly like we're at an impasse. I see some hands up. That's pretty much all I had for my points, but I'd be really happy to take some questions.
Holly?
2 points. I believe that Act 71 has some obligations for VITA, and that VCBB has responsibility to work with VITA to make funding possible. So Stan, you might want to pull out your Act 71 and look at what the role of VCBB is set by that legislation is in the funding conversation. Very nice. And the second one question is to you, Will. What in your experience in that particular federal loan program, was the federal grant subordinated to the loans?
Well, in this instance, the loans and grants both came from the RUS.
Oh,
so the
okay.
funding source was linked, and
that's
I'm
totally
thinking
different. That's totally different. Okay.
Well, it is totally different. But my thinking is that a collaborative approach might be able to kind of replicate the success of that program by allowing the assets to be shared in a way that all parties have agreed upon. But it's not my area of expertise. It just seems like a solution that should be explored.
So one of the things that, and I'm sorry that Laura isn't able to join us today, but one of the things that seems important to me is we're probably all assuming why this language is in Act 71 with the reversion in it, but the goal might be met in a more productive way. So it might be good for us to understand the legislative intent behind that.
Yeah, I'll also just quickly add to that, Holly, that the association has not adopted an official position on changing that language in Act 71. On the contrary, my marching orders are simply to explore changes to problems, solutions, and positives of the legislation. The CUDs are not advocating for any change to that language at this point in time. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
So I just wanted to touch a little bit on the VITA. We had the VITA issues. We did have some conversations with them last week, and they're continuing of how they can play a larger role. The challenge with the ARPA funds is they can't be used for finance charges, and a revolving loan fund was not something that was looked kindly upon. So if we were going to be setting up a separate loan fund, it would have to be from other funds not connected to the American Rescue Plan Act, which is a challenge. That being said, we are working with them to explore other options with the changes at USDA Reconnect, or I guess with RUS, there's some other loan guarantees that may be an opportunity to help make the funding packages a little more attractive. But it is something we're looking at because we have many of the same concerns.
Well, Rob, any way that I can get in the conversation just to learn more about what we can do on the CUD end, I'd really appreciate. So I'll be in touch with you about that and try to get on board a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, Will, when I took this job, I reached out. I have some relationships with some of the national cooperative banks, and I reached out to the Cooperative Finance Corporation, and they basically said, the VITA had reached out to CFC earlier, but that was prior to having all this funding. So I'm going to take your suggestion and go back to VITA and talk about the possibility of reaching out to CFC again to see if we can put together a finance program. So thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, that would be great, Christine. Again, I'm happy to help. I've been looking at this from a lot of different angles. Admittedly, it's been a little bit difficult for me just trying to learn as I go when it comes to financing. But I think that that solution has a lot of potential, just as the ones that we're exploring with Act 71 do as well.
We're also continuing conversations with the Community Foundation and others to see about other alternative funding scenarios.
Yeah,
my
thinking continues to be, let's bring it all together. Let's figure out a way to get everyone who wants to fund CUDs involved in a way that suits them for investment. So, Community Foundation, top of the list. I'll also say, with regard to, I guess, I'm optimistic about the governor's budget address this afternoon. I do look forward to seeing what he has to say, and especially to what happens at Senate Finance on Thursday. and I'm happy to support with any information or assistance on the CUD and with that funding effort as well.
So Christine,
Thank
do you
you.
want to
Go ahead.
share the news, or would you like me to?
No, go ahead. You share the news.
Okay, so one of the major reasons the RFP has not been released is that we now have permission to share this, is the governor is going to announce in the budget address today that another 95 million in ARPA funds for the VCBB for the grant programs, as well as support for $100 million from the infrastructure bill through the same process. This all will take legislative action, but it's nice to put a stake in the ground in terms of where the administration stands and how supportive they are of our efforts, the CUD efforts, and the efforts of other eligible providers.
Great. So that's fantastic news, Rob. And I'm sure that you and Christine have played some role in securing that coup, frankly. But is that expected to be deployed all 195 million in this budget via this announcement?
I think the process is still being determined in terms of the infrastructure bill, but that's in the budget address and what is being called for the budget for the coming year. That budget would be effective, I assume, on June 30th or July 1st of this year.
Understood.
So while there's the 116 million in the grant program now, there may be or need to make some adjustments later on. You can expect that the vast majority of those funds will likely end up in the grant program towards the end of next year. So.
Understood. Well, I concur that as we've discussed, Rob, there may be some legislative challenges, and on behalf of the CUDs, I'll be right along the VCBB to support our stance in securing that funding for the final budget.
Yeah, our messaging that the more money that can be put towards this in grant funding makes it less expensive for Vermonters in the long run is gaining attention, and I think it's very important we keep reiterating that.
Patty?
Rob and Christine, can you walk us through the process of what legislative committees have to approve this? The governor's going to recommend it, but he can't do it without legislative support. Can you just help us with what committees it's going through?
I would expect a lot of committees to have their hands on the final budget, but it will certainly go through Senate Finance, House Energy and Tech, Appropriations. Yeah. It's going to be a process, and we will make sure in our legislative update at every board meeting that we let you all know.
Yeah, we're happy that the governor, it was a negotiation process with the administration. You know, there's so many, I sympathize with the legislature and the governor for all the issues they're facing, right? You know, you talk about healthcare and you talk about housing. So there was back and forth, but I'm happy that the governor supports this funding.
So timing wise, this may be a couple months out, 3 months out?
I wouldn't expect the budget to pass for a few months.
Okay.
So just as a matter of public relations and so on, would it be helpful if our chair published an editorial on the value of adding resources to what some will view as our already wealthy coffers?
I think it would be very helpful personally. So Patty, be glad to work with you on that.
You want should that be coming from the full board?
That's fine with me, but I think it would be good if we were public in our support of additional funding.
Just wondering if an editorial is the right mode of operation here, or some other means of communication.
We could talk offline about it. There's a lot of different places to put that information or that position.
Yep, Christine, I'm happy to work on that with you, and let's brainstorm. Well, I would suggest having it come, and it certainly can come under my name, but on behalf of the full VCBB, unless somebody has an objection to that. All right, happy to work on that.
I have resources I'd offer as well, Patty.
Great.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. I don't have any further questions for Will, Holly, Patty.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks for your
Okay.
good thinking.
Yep,
Thank you.
thank you.
I presume Brian is still listening to us here. He's just off camera. He can step in if he needs. So
I'm here.
okay, I didn't know if you had any other questions.
Nope.
You're good. Okay, so we're a bit ahead of schedule, but I think that's a good thing. So we're at, go ahead, Holly.
This probably comes at the end of the meeting, but I did want to, well, I can remember it, note that there's been an email from someone named Heather Scandale addressed to the board, and we need to reply to her. It's almost in the nature of a public comment, but it's about what can she do to help access broadband at her location. Patty, I don't know if you've seen this, but maybe we could relay this task addressed to us to someone on staff.
It's sent to us, but
I
it's
just would chime in.
addressed.
I think that's a staff level item versus a board level.
I'm agreeing with you. It's addressed to dear Christine, but the email is to us. I just want to confirm that I don't want to think that I have any obligation here.
I'd be glad to take that on.
I'm
And
sorry,
if it's about a specific address, that's something that the CAPI team can assist with at the Public Service Department.
It's a very nice letter. I think it's her comments are consistent with thousands of other people who we are seeking to address their concerns as well.
Yep, I do respond to those individually, but you know,
Thank you,
pretty much, yeah, and I will.
Thank you.
So with that, then let's move to public input. If anyone has comment, Rob, could you lead that?
Sure. I don't see any hands at this moment, but I'm confident that will change momentarily. Yes, Steve, you are up.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think I heard you say it. I just want to verify that the construction grant RFP is going to be issued today.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be issued by the end of the day once we incorporate some
You're
of
my
the
hero, Rob.
changes. Tell me that after you're trying to pull everything together for it. Thank you. Is that everything? Okay. Any other public comment? I don't see any at this point.
Okay.
None.
With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
Okay, Patty, second. All in favor? Aye.
Hey.
Aye.
All right. With that, we will conclude this meeting on 11/17.
When's our next meeting?
Thank you, everybody.
Just to put that out there, when's our next meeting?
2 weeks.
2 weeks from yesterday.
Okay.
Is
Sorry again for being late. I just had it in my head that it was at noon.
Our next meeting's at noon, correct, Rob?
yes, noon on the 31st of January.
Okay.
We'll try not to screw that up too much, but over time. But this,
Great. Thank you, everyone. Stay warm.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
bye.
Aye.